The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call David Seymour.
Mr Speaker, I rise on behalf of the ACT Party in opposition to this bill. Mr Speaker, I have to commend the Speaker who's just, the member who's just resumed his seat and the member in charge of this bill for the intentions that led them to bring this bill to the House and to advocate for it. I think everybody in this Parliament broadly shares the intention that people who work in New Zealand should be well remunerated, that their work should be safe, ideally enjoyable, and that it will give them the money required to live well. There's no question that that intention is broadly shared by every party in this House, by every MP, including myself. But where the differentiation begins to occur is when you start assessing the bill, or any policy for that matter, on the basis of its consequences and its outcomes, rather than merely its intentions. Because, Mr Speaker, while I commend the soft hearts of the Labor Party that led to them bringing this bill to the House, I worry that the softness has extended to their heads. It's possible that the member in charge of the bill, being from the very, very cold Dunedin, where they have very, very cold winters, has possibly not been able to think rapidly enough as the cold temperature has got to his brain. And, Mr Speaker, the issue at hand is that a good piece of legislation should address a well-defined problem. And one has to ask oneself, Mr Speaker, what exactly is the problem that this bill seeks to solve? And the problem, it appears to be, if you take the bill's author at his word, is that not everybody is earning quite as much as the minimum wage when they are contractors. Interesting to see, Mr Speaker, that they haven't included taxi drivers in the list of professions, and the problem, it seems that they have, is not actually a natural problem or a market failure. It's just that there's a wide range of different types of work that people do, and not every kind of work is remunerated on an hourly basis for a wide range of reasons. In the case of taxi drivers, the reason is that they spend a large amount of time waiting for trips. Now, people that choose to make themselves available waiting to do a job might not be able to do that if they required the minimum wage amount of revenue for every hour that they spent doing it. And so ultimately you have to ask, what is the Labor Party saying to those people? That they should stop working, that working should become illegal? It simply does not make sense, and that's when we come to the unintended consequence of this bill, is that if we are going to require all contractual work to be done on a minimum wage basis, then what should be said to the many small business people out there who often have very few employees, who actually are unable often to pay themselves the minimum wage? Mr Speaker, I've been in this situation myself, technically breaking the law when I started hiring myself out as a consultant at one point in my career, and I spent a huge amount of time at the beginning attempting to get busy, and I didn't actually get paid anything for all of that time. Under this bill, technically, I would be breaking the law. Now, of course, eventually, members will be pleased to know I did actually get some very lucrative contracts and paid myself out in the end. But for a time, I, like many small business people, would find themselves actually breaking the law if this bill was to pass, because when you own a small business, when you start a small business, when you're busy trying to get busy and bring in work to contract with, often you actually can't pay yourself the minimum wage. So this bill doesn't apply to taxi drivers. It cannot apply to people in any kind of small business if it's in one of the 16 types of work that are scheduled. But what about those that it does apply to? They seem to believe that the government can costlessly raise the amount of income that people have. And I thought it was very interesting to hear what Ian Lees-Galloway said. He said, we believe on this side of the House that if a person is working, then they should get the minimum wage. And that's the key word there, Mr Speaker, is if, because the reality of this bill is that by trying to require higher wages than people are currently earning, in many cases their employment will go out of business. And Mr Lees-Galloway said that would happen, and he seemed to almost relish the thought that a business owner would go out of business. But perhaps if he was to complete the thought, he'd ask himself what would actually happen to the person presently doing that work. Is it the case that the Labor Party, when they ask if a person is working, that they would rather a person currently contracted under these provisions stopped working altogether? Because that's the real trade-off, Mr Speaker. Because we haven't got a properly defined problem in this, because we haven't got a properly defined problem for this bill to solve, it's not actually bringing any good. But to the extent it's effective, it is also going to reduce employment, and that is before we start talking about all the additional compliance costs. And, Mr Speaker, it's an observation, funnily enough, by an Auckland University economist, whose name is going to escape me, Tim, who made the point that one of the things that's happened in the New Zealand economy in the last 30 or 40 years is that we have an enormously greater amount of compliance, transactional management activity, and far less activity of actually producing valuable stuff as a proportion of the economy. And this is one of the reasons why productivity growth has been a bit weak lately. And once you start to look through the Select Committee report and think about what this bill would mean, it means that a whole lot of types of work where people are paid to deliver a service are going to have to effectively become employment, and that people are going to have to start measuring how many hours they spend on the job so that they can divide their income by that amount of time. And then once they've started doing that, you're going to have to be able to verify whether it's actually true. And of course, the Leader of the Opposition says that it's shocking that you'd have to do that. And I understand he's being sarcastic. He's right at one level, that of course it is perfectly plausible that people could adjust to that extra cost if this law passed and if they were required to do so. Perfectly plausible that it could be done. But you have to ask yourself, Mr Speaker, how many more costs can business people and employers, people who in many cases in the start of their businesses don't even earn the minimum wage themselves, how many more costs should they have to take in order to pursue to comply with a law that doesn't have a clearly defined problem to be solved, and a law that, if anything, will have more damaging unintended consequences of making it harder to start business, of making it illegal to do many types of work that people are currently gainfully employed in, and for all of that, putting additional compliance costs for those meagre benefits and in some cases negative unintended consequences. Mr Speaker, this Parliament, I hope, can find far more productive things to debate than simply trying to add additional compliance costs for what really, from the Labor Party's point of view, is more of an exercise, in my view, of political branding than actual policy improvement. And for all of those reasons, Mr Speaker, I proudly oppose this bill.
I call Andrew